Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Before we start the discussion today, the Council sends out condolences and support to all the family members and loved ones of the deceased and injured in yesterday's grievous plane accident in Ahmedabad. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to the Indian Council of World Affairs for this panel discussion on the theme Operation Sindoor, Starting a New Narrative. May I request you to keep your phones on the silent mode, please? Thank you. We will start this afternoon's program with Ms. Nutan Kapoor Mahavar, Acting Director General, ICWA, delivering her opening remarks. The panel discussion will be chaired by Ambassador Satish Chandra, former Deputy NSA and High Commissioner to Pakistan. The discussion will be followed by a brief question and answer session moderated by the chair. May I now request Ms. Nutan Kapoor Mahavar, Acting Director General, ICWA, to kindly give her welcome remarks. Ma'am.
Distinguished Chair and panelists, members of the Diplomatic Corps, students and friends. 6 months ago, in January, ICWA organized a panel discussion to assess the ongoing crisis in Pakistan. The discussion focused on the trends of the last 15 years, especially post-President Musharraf, in Pakistan's domestic political, security, and economic environment and their external implications. The discussion expressed the view that Pakistan polity, since its inception, has provided fertile soil for the breeding of religious radicalism and ferment, military adventurism, deceit, and has pursued a unifocal policy of hate towards its larger neighbor, defining its existence and external relations, as well as the indoctrination of its people on that basis. Pahalgam was yet another brutal instance of Pakistan's consistently errant and demonic behavior, which received the response that it ought to. With the rising severity of terror attacks since the past decade and a half, and learning the lessons of 26/11, which you all recall, including the young students, there has been a compelling need for India to alter its geostrategic posture in response to Pak-sponsored terrorism, opting to escalate its response to terror attacks, an approach which was avoided in the past. Yes, to alter its geostrategic posture and approach to Pakistan. Initiating with the surgical strikes on terror pads in POK after the Uri terror attack, striking terrorist camps post-Pulwama in Balakot in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Operation Sindoor is a natural progression of India's evolving new posture. Operation Sindoor saw the taking down of 9 terrorist infrastructures, as you have all heard on TV, including the JEM and LET headquarters and numerous terrorist camps, and 11 military air bases inside Pakistan. Operation Sindoor showed to the world the nuclear bluff and rhetoric that Pakistan banked on till date and the general weakness of Pakistan's military defense, even in protecting its own military infrastructure, including its nuclear arsenal. Operation Sindoor was a resounding military success, backed by the full support of the people of India. India has long spoken about the connivance of the Pakistan military with terror groups in international and bilateral fora. Operation Sindoor has not only exposed the ineffectiveness of Pakistan's military, but has also reinforced its perception as a parasite on Pakistan's society with its strong linkages to terror and unlawful activities and its deep-seated rent-seeking behavior. Friends, our discussion today is meant to focus on starting a new narrative in our approach to Pakistan, beginning with Operation Sindoor. What must be the elements of this new approach? The following come to mind. 1. Inflicting punishment for conspiratorial behavior politically and economically. 2. Using full state machinery to counter Pakistan's evil designs. 3. Full demonstration of India's might. 4. Zero tolerance to terrorism, implying destroying hardcore terrorists and terror infrastructure within Pakistan, accompanied by credible threat of use of force for every act of terror on Indian soil. 5. Inflicting pain where it hurts the most, namely suspending the Indus Water Treaty. 6. Firm policy of no talks. 7. Puncturing Pakistan's nuclear blackmail tactics. 8. Exposing the insincerity of Pakistan's strategic restraint regime as also of its international exponents. 9. Calling the bluff of nuclear flashpoint theorists within and outside Pakistan. 10. Obliterating Pakistan's dubious distinction between state and non-state actors serving as fountainheads of terror and nuclear proliferation emanating from Pakistan. 11. Destroying any linkage between weapons of mass destruction and terror. 12. Rethinking and reviewing the existing CBM's confidence building measures metrics with Pakistan in the backdrop of India's evolving new posture. And 13, continuing to expose Pakistan's compulsive hostility to India with renewed vigor. Friends, with Operation Sindoor, we finally stand dehyphenated from Pakistan. When I joined the Indian Foreign Service nearly 3 decades ago, we were told at our training school, our alma mater, that Pakistan is India's Achilles heel. Today, that sounds totally anachronistic. We can firmly say that those days are well past us. Pakistan's misdemeanor, dishonesty, and conspiracies have been completely vanquished by India's rise, its resilience, its civilizational strengths, and the honesty, sincerity, capability, and hard work of people. No force in the world can keep us boxed in South Asia and locked into persistent hostility with Pakistan. And this really is the true meaning of dehyphenation from Pakistan. The world is India's oyster and Pakistan a mere speck and irritant. And yes, India has only just announced a strategic pause in Operation Sindoor. I look forward to a thought-provoking discussion, and I wish all the panelists all the very best. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. May I now request Ambassador Satish Chandra to give his remarks and conduct the proceedings. Ambassador, sir.
Thank you very much. At the outset, I would like to say what a pleasure it is for me to be here at ICWA. And this is all the more so because around 6 decades ago, I started my probationary period at ICWA. We used to have our training here. So for me, this is alma mater. And it's a particular pleasure to me here, for me to be here. And I'm grateful that you have thought it fit to invite me to this event to chair it. At the very outset, I would like to commend ICWA and to Ms. Nowar for the very detailed comments she had made on it, summing up the main aspects of Operation Sindoor and what it means so very well. At the risk of being a bit provocative, I would suggest that many in India, and it's unfortunate because Pakistan is a neighboring country, we still don't fully understand the ugly nature of Pakistan. And I think tanks like ICWA should be more proactive, in fact, in filling this gap of understanding Pakistan. And this is a deliberate provocative comment in the question answers. If I'm asked, I would fill that up, but I won't do so because I want to remain within my 5 minutes time. I think the points for discussion are very clear from what Ms. Nawar mentioned and from the very good concept note that has been put out. And I'm sure the distinguished panelists who are here with me, and it's a well-chosen panel because you have representation from the military, from media, and from academe, who will be able to appropriately address these issues. I would, however, like to mention 6 points which stand out for me in terms of Operation Sindoor, and it'll be very, very brief on these. Op Sindoor was a short, sharp, swift example of modern non-contact warfare, ending in an emphatic Indian victory. Pakistan pleaded for ceasefire. India agreed because our primary objectives, namely getting at the terrorists, were fulfilled. 2, and Ms. Nawar has made this point, and it is important, I would repeat it. The operation successfully called Pakistan's nuclear bluff, and as we all know, that this bluff has rarely been called in the past. 3, it demonstrated very clear that India had come a fairly long way, both in preventing any damage to itself by Pakistani retaliatory action. And you all saw visuals of the drones, the UAVs, et cetera, that came at us. Damage on the Indian side was minimal. And along with that, we were able to cause, and mention was made of this, of fairly considerable damage on the other side with pinpoint accuracy. I think another thing, that's the point 4, that stands out for me is that we came through as an extremely responsible state in terms of the fact that we took great care to minimize collateral damage, and we were not interested in escalating the conflict. Our objective was to strike at terror. We did so. However, when Pakistan went further, we reacted and caused the sort of damage we felt was necessary to prevent them from going further. 5 acts, and this is what the Prime Minister said, it needs reiteration. Acts of terror will be treated by India as acts of war. And finally, the 6th point, which is, I think, very important, and an allusion was made to this already. There will be no business as usual with Pakistan as long as it does not eschew the use of terror. And I think this cannot be better symbolized than by our having decided to keep the Indus Waters Treaty in abeyance till Pakistan stops exporting terror. I think, in my view, this is our Brahmastra, even better than kinetic action, even more telling than kinetic action. I'll conclude there, and it's my very happy task now to turn to our eminent panelists, who I would request to kindly strictly abide by the 10-minute timeline as suggested by the organizers, so that we can have time for a meaningful discussion. The first speaker is my good friend, Chandra.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And am I audible at the back? Thank you. 10 minutes under the sun. Very, very difficult and challenging assignment, no doubt. Ambassador Satish, Chandra, thank you so much for chairing this session. It's an honor always to be with you on any panel. My friend Aditya, with whom I have spoken so many times on television panels. It's always, and of course, other academic panels. It's always a pleasure to be with you too. And thank you, ICWA. Since I'm also a member of your governing council, it's a double pleasure for me to come and be here and join you for this session. This discussion has used one term in the concept paper also, and being used all the time since 22nd of April. All the time it's been in the media. The term is called narrative. I'm not sure how many people academically in India understand the meaning of narrative. So I chose to define it for you. Let me define it the way I picked it up. In conflict terms, narratives can be of all kinds. In conflict terms, in post-conflict terms, which is what we are looking at here, a narrative is a structured and often a contested account that societies construct in the aftermath of a violent conflict to explain the causes, the consequences, the role of various players, and the way forward. That's what is a narrative. It brings in legitimacy. It brings in the issue of blame, issue of who were the perpetrators, whether any reform is required in the post-conflict period, who was the victor and who was the defeated, and the possible and the potentiality of resurgence. All this comes into narratives. I can keep going on and on. It is crafted for domestic and international consumption. And rarely do you ever find a single narrative. Narratives will be multiple across the board. So keeping this aspect at the back of your mind, I have, so far we have seen 13 issues, 6 issues by Ambassador Satish Chandra. Now I'll come down to something somewhere nearby, 10 issues. 10 questions I will ask myself and indirectly asking you. Should India have executed Operation Sindoor on the 23rd of April, considering that 22nd of April was Pahalgam, a day after the Pahalgam massacre, and not waited till the 7th of May? That's a question which lots of people should be asking. I would say what we did, waiting 15 days, no doubt. We followed the same old practice during the surgical strikes. We also waited, I think, 14 days, and the other one was 15 days too. A pattern has been set, but it was the minimum period required. And remember, especially when two nations are both nuclear armed, a suddenness of a decision, despite a terrorist act or anything, a suddenness of a decision can cause a certain degree of turbulence, psychological, mental turbulence. And therefore, chances are rarely taken in this circumstances. So surprise is a very important factor of which is there in war. But despite that, when you have a nuclear angle attached to it, normally most states would desist from it. So I think we did the right thing, absolutely the correct thing. Second thing, a build-up. You can't stay in a state of mobilization forever. You can't say the Indian Air Force must keep the assets exactly at those places from where they're going to attack. It's not physically not possible, right? And it's very, very expensive to stay in that state. What happened in Parakram? You had the army in the state of mobilization for almost 15 months. And it affected us so deeply as far as our budget was concerned. So I think the decision was absolutely bang on, intelligence-wise also, planning-wise also. You can't always be planning for a decision or for a strike the very next day or the very same night when something has happened. Why was Pahalgam executed at all? Knowing that Pakistan could not have sustained an inevitable conflict which would follow, or that economically Pakistan was in a position to continue with it after having provoked it, or from an internal security angle, or from the western border angle, what was happening on the Durand line. So why would Pakistan decide to suddenly, all of a sudden, one fine day, provoke India in this particular manner? And the answer to it lies in 2 issues. Number one, the irrational character of the Pakistani nation. There's nothing rational. You can never apply rationality there. To say, Pervez Musharraf, why did he decide to do Kargil at that time? Brilliant conflict initiation, deciding to go into Kargil. Where did he ever think of conflict termination? Where would that conflict take him? He never looked at it. Similar here. Brilliant initiation. You go in and good tourist season going on, 8 lakh people having visited the Tulip Garden, etc. And suddenly you do this provocative act. Good. You have done whatever you wanted to try and achieve. Where will it take you? That issue was somehow has never been explained correctly. And I think a lot was dependent upon Asim Munir's personal ambitions. To be seen to be different, to be seen to be Pervez Musharraf plus. That was one of his things. And if you've seen his background, he's a Hafiz, very, very deeply religiously ordained. Otherwise, he's the kind of guy who thinks he's different. And he was suffering from a bit of a setback with the events which happened on the 9th of May last year. You know, when the Lahore, when the Corps Commander's house was raided and you had biryani being taken away from his refrigerator and things like that, it set the army back in terms of reputation. And internally within the army, there were problems taking place. So he wanted to show himself up again. Most Pakistani chiefs or senior functionaries are those who have served in Kashmir, those who have stayed and commanded 10 corps. Asim Munir has not commanded 10 corps, he's commanded 30 corps down below in Sialkot. And besides that, he rose to be the chief from the Quartermaster General's appointment, which is usually a very rare thing. So his self-esteem is also a thing which was in question. To show yourself as a hero all of a sudden. Obviously, the irrationality factor was very strong. Did India achieve its political and its military objectives by launching Operation Sindoor? I think militarily, we succeeded in disrupting the terrorist infrastructure. We're striking deep for the first time in the center of gravity, right there in Punjab. We had our strikes, which were precision strikes, and as damage assessment showed subsequently, we never had any damage assessment available to us after Balakot. We did not have it after surgical strikes. This is the first time when we had actual damage assessment available to us, which we could put out to the whole world. It reaffirmed our proactive action, forceful but measured retaliation, including the Indus Waters Treaty, the non-kinetic part of our response and retaliation. It showed we could take extreme measures if required. Politically, I think it reinforced the political will which seemed to have been acquired in 2016 at the time of the surgical strikes. Again, displayed in 2019, and this time definitely displayed once again and reinforced. It affirmed proactive action also. And besides that, one thing is quite certain, that as far as success is concerned, we couldn't say that you have actually deterred Pakistan. A lot of people will ask you this question: did India achieve deterrence against Pakistan? I don't think India ever set out to achieve deterrence. We know what is our military capability. We know what is the degree of asymmetry. It's not such an intense asymmetry that you can achieve deterrence in a limited conflict. This was a limited conflict, a limited war, you can say. To achieve deterrence, you have to go whole hog and probably fight a 22-day war or a 30-day war and destroy and degrade Pakistan's complete military machinery. Only then will you be able to achieve that kind of a deterrence. The term to use here is dissuasion. What you achieved was actually dissuasion, which means the next time he decides to do it, he must think 100 times. He may have thought 10 times this time, but next time he must think 100 times. That is the cost which you have imposed on him. Were we ever close to a nuclear exchange anytime during Op Sindoor? Well, for the simple thing, I would say, we didn't cross the international border. We didn't cross the line of control. We didn't carry out a blockade. Mostly, these are the issues which are considered as red lines, right? None of the red lines were threatened. And I think we kept escalation entirely under control. It's a contrived narrative which Pakistan may have put out that we were now, and a lot of people want to sort of believe into it, that we were hitting Kirana Hills, where the nuclear facilities are, and that we were deliberately targeting them, etc. I don't think all that is entirely right from a professional angle. India was very clear. The red lines were not to be crossed. I have three minutes left. What is the likely effect on Pakistan's Jammu and Kashmir obsession? Will it pull back from the proxy war? I think Pakistan has invested too much on Jammu and Kashmir since 1989. There's no question of pulling back. It will seek not to lose its relevance. If you ask me, the prime reason for Pahalgam, it was primarily to re-establish its own relevance. If Pakistan had not done something this year, and you had the most successful tourist season once again in Jammu and Kashmir, the relevance of Pakistan would have been halved to a great extent. And given the situation over the next couple of years, Pakistan would have been irrelevant in Kashmir. It is to regain that relevance. And I could always discuss this in greater detail. From now onwards, what I anticipate, you may not find too much of kinetics taking place in Jammu and Kashmir, but Pakistan will want to retain that so-called relevance it perceives that it has established. A sense of victimhood will be played, outreach to the youth, greater radicalization, using false flag kind of efforts to paint the Indian armed forces, try and target smaller targets like migrant labor or, traffic policemen and things like that, so that a large number of such events act as if they are a big event. The announced intent, the Prime Minister's intent, the Honorable Prime Minister's intent of every terror act being equal to war, which was alluded to just now by Ambassador Satish Chandra also, can this be sustained? To my mind, I think we are taking it too literally. The Prime Minister never intended to mean this, that for killing of a traffic policeman, we are going to go to war. No. What he said was, he put Pakistan on notice. We will decide the time and place, the kind of provocation when we decide to go to war against you. And it was more rhetorical and more psychological. After all, warfare conflicts are not just about kinetics. It's a lot to do with mind. And therefore, that psychological aspect was so important. There are nuclear risks involved and the economics of being mobilized all the time. So I don't think the Prime Minister would ever look at it in a literal way. I think he has left it in the gray zone, which is exactly what it needs to be kept at. My last point. What is meant by Op Sindoor has not ended. It's only on hold. Strategic pause, as was alluded to just now. Any operation, most of Indian Army operations, Indian Armed Forces operations do not end on a single fine day. They allow you to remain in a state of mobilization, readiness, etc., for whatever may come about. This is not a situation which is clear-cut, where everything is going to end on a particular day. July is the month when Pakistan is going to be chairing the UN Security Council. You never know what kind of event, what comes into the irrational minds of the Pakistanis at that time. So that was my second last point. And my last point. Is it true that the post-conflict narrative of international support is in favor of Pakistan? That's a question I would definitely like to leave to my good friend Aditya to answer. But let me be provocative. There is a sense and feeling here everywhere in India. We won the war, but lost the peace again. Is that true entirely? We can discuss that in question hour. I will stop here and thank you very much for this opportunity.
Very much, General Saab. Well, you had General Atta at his best, combining beautifully the military aspects with the political developments and the nuances there. I have a few differences, but we'll come to that later. Many points of agreement too, but it was very good. Thank you very much. And now I turn to Mr. Raj Kaul, please.
Thank you very much. Firstly, thank you to ICWA, Nutanji. And of course, it's a mighty challenge for me to speak after Satish Chandra ji and General Hasnain, two veterans and two, people who have mastered, Pakistan in many ways to understand Pakistan. But as someone who has covered Jammu and Kashmir in Pakistan for more than 1.5 decades, and someone who comes from Jammu and Kashmir, I can speak just briefly about the past and present of Operation Sindoor, of what happened really, and what might happen or how we need to prepare ourselves. From the very beginning, the Pahalgam terror attack took place in April. And immediately there was this news of how religion of those people was checked. And on the basis of the religion, this was done. And there was panic. There was a lot of fear psychosis all across the country, globally as well. Because perhaps for the first time on headlines, you had that on the basis of religion, such attacks were taking place. But to my friends here, I should tell you that this is not new. This has been happening for a very long time. And I'm telling you this because you need to understand the background of how this happened. A week or 10 days before Pahalgam terror attack happened, we had the Pakistan Army Chief Asim Munir addressing Pakistanis in Pakistan. And he said, we are not like Hindus. We are very different. And that was seen as almost a call given to the proxy groups of Pakistan in Jammu and Kashmir and in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir to launch an attack. There are a lot of these sleeper cells of Lashkar-e-Toiba, of Jaish-e-Mohammed, of Hizbul Mujahideen over the years who have established themselves in Jammu and Kashmir. Currently, figures say that there would be perhaps 80 to 150 Pakistani terrorists hiding deep inside Jammu and Kashmir. So this speech was directly linked to what happened in Pahalgam. Religion was checked, and specifically male members were targeted and killed. And the spouses were told to tell the Prime Minister that we are sparing your life. And this is a message for the Prime Minister. And the message was taken, and there was a response that was given. The response, with the name itself, Operation Sindoor, for the respect of the women who lost their husbands, their brothers, their sons, and their fathers. But you need to understand the kind of radicalization that has grappled Pakistan completely. And you need to also understand the kind of security situation that's been happening in Pakistan, of course, over the last many decades, but especially over the last 2-3 years. In Balochistan, there has been a complete rebellion that has picked up by the Baloch rebellion groups. In Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, there is the Pashtun Tahaffuz movement that is leading a very peaceful march against the Pakistani regime. And on the other hand, there is the TTP, linked with the Taliban in Pakistan, with Afghanistan as well. And they are trying to strike the Pakistani army, the Frontier Corps, almost on a daily basis. Unfortunately, we do not get this news very regularly because the Pakistani media is moderated to a great extent by the Pakistani ISPR. Even during Operation Sindoor, we may have had midnight press conferences by Ahmed Chaudhry, the chief of the ISPR, the spokesperson of the Pakistan Army, but we weren't given the real figures. Now, what is the most striking difference between Operation Sindoor and earlier operations that India did, most recently in 2019, the Balakot airstrikes, and 2016, the surgical strikes? At that time, there's this huge political debate in India about where is the proof? Where are the images? Where are the videos that have come out? Now, this time, not only did we have satellite images and cockpit images of what really happened out there, we had proof coming in from the Pakistani public. Pakistani public immediately put out videos of what was happening all across, which was completely undeniable. The initial phase of the Operation Sindoor was very meticulously, very calculated, and in a very strategic fashion done to target only the terror epicenters in Bawalpur, which is the headquarters of the Jaish-e-Mohammed, in Muridke, which is the headquarters of the Lashkar-e-Toiba, and Muzaffarabad, that's been a hotbed of terror launchpad for 3 decades or more now. And it was very strategically said and very openly and publicly said that we have nothing against the Pakistani public. We are not even attacking the Pakistan army. Our fight is against terror, and we have a linkage between the Pakistani terror groups, the proxy groups, and the Pakistan army, but we are hitting the epicenters of terror, and we did that. And when the retaliation came in, we went in for the air defense, and of course, for the airfields and the command control centers. Of course, there's a debate, and I'm also of the opinion that India perhaps should have hit the air defenses much earlier when the airstrikes were actually happening on, the airfields, and before that, before at the terror launch pads. But militarily, many would disagree, and they would say that, if there was an attack on the air defenses in the initial phase of the operation, that would have been a blatant call for war. But, my friends, as General Hasnain said, that one of the questions that we have been grappling with post the Operation Sindoor is also the narrative, is also whether we were successful. We were successful militarily, but were we successful in gaining peace, in gaining the narrative to make the international community understand the reality of the Pakistani terrorism and what has been happening? I think there's a marked shift again, because now we have ambassadors of India, especially in US, UK, Australia, and Israel, openly going to TV studios there, being questioned and answering to the public out there, representatives of the public through media, as to what happened, why India was forced into this military confrontation. But I also believe that India needs to engage much more with think tanks locally in global capitals, with the diaspora out there, and try to make not just a case, but an understanding of what Pakistan has been for the last many decades and what we Kashmiris have been facing as civilians in Jammu and Kashmir for the last more than 35 years. Now, this DNA of Pakistan army, the Pakistani deep state, is not going to change. As General Hasnain again said, that yes, we were not there to deter, we were there to dissuade them. And that is, we've not crossed the nuclear threshold, but we have done something much mightier, but bigger than Balakot, and something which was purely visible to everyone to see. Again, another question that we've been grappling with is of the ceasefire that happened on May 10th. But you need to understand that Pakistan, after being attacked on the air bases and military command control centers and facing that embarrassment all across, was looking for an off-ramp, was desperately looking for an off-ramp. And that off-ramp was provided when Pakistan Army and the Pakistani diplomats reached out to US, UAE, Turkey, and China, asking them to mediate immediately. And that's how that off-ramp happened. India was very categorical because, I was also briefed by the Ministry of External Affairs and others. I can tell you that when J.D. Vance and, Marco Rubio spoke to Indian leaders, they, of course, asked for a dialogue. But India was very clear that we will go for a dialogue only when Pakistan requests us and says that they will end fire, and we will agree to that limited dialogue that will happen. And that's what happened. The DGMO of Pakistan on May 10th at around 1 p.m. reached out. At 3:30, that dialogue happened. And finally, at 5 p.m. or later, that ceasefire was achieved. Now, will Pakistan change? I don't think so. Is Pakistan emboldened? I feel so. And that's because you'll have to understand the character of the Pakistan army and Asim Munir specifically. As General Hasnain again said, that Asim Munir is a Hafiz. If you see his videos, he asks his soldiers that you are leading a jihad against India. You're not Pakistani soldiers. You're soldiers of Allah leading this battle. The Allah is not on the side of India. Allah is on the side of Pakistan. If this is the kind of brutal radicalization and indoctrination that is happening, if there is no professionalism, unfortunately, in the Pakistan army, what else will you expect? When we attacked the Pakistani terror centers, one thing that happened was family members of a very dreaded terrorist, Maulana Masood Azhar, were killed in Bawalpur. Next day, we had funerals that happened all across in Murid Ke in Bawalpur with the presence of the Pakistani military, the Pakistani police officers, and district administration. What more proof does the international community want of a direct linkage between the Pakistan army and their puppets, the Jaish-e-Mohammed and the Lashkar-e-Toiba? Now, many feel what will happen now. I feel that terrorism will continue. I feel that terrorism will not be, unfortunately, restricted to Jammu and Kashmir, but perhaps in other parts of the country. Because if you study the pattern of Jaish-e-Mohammed, it has not only attacked the Indian parliament or conducted attacks in Jammu and Kashmir, it has conducted attack in Pathankot, in Punjab, in several other areas. And if you have killed the family members of Masood Azhar, and nobody knows if Masood Azhar is alive, is he there or not, because perhaps since 2019, there's been a shadowy absence of his audios, etc., that have come out. But if you have done so, Jaish-e-Mohammed would want revenge. And if you again study the Al-Kalam Weekly that comes out from the Jaish-e-Mohammed, you would see that their attacks, their propaganda, their narrative is mostly against Prime Minister Modi, is mostly against Hindutva, is mostly against the RSS, is mostly against the Ayodhya. So you could imagine what could be coming for. You also saw that immediately in the retaliation that came in from Pakistan, there were temples that were attacked. And one very important thing that many people are not talking about is that over the last 6 years, ever since the abrogation of Article 370, there's been a paradigm shift with the way things have happened in Jammu and Kashmir. There's been a relative peace. And that's why when the common Kashmiris for the first time in last more than 3 decades tasted this peace, tasted this kind of a change happening on ground, there was tourism, there was a boom in economy, there was, infrastructure development that was happening, flyovers, trains now coming in. You saw the Prime Minister with the Vande Bharat recently. They felt that this is the new normal and this is how we want to live in India very peacefully. But Pakistan was frustrated. Pakistan was desperate that this peace should not continue for a very long time. And that's why this attack, and there was this understanding, as General Hasnain has served in Baramulla, in Srinagar, all across, he would know that there was this kind of an understanding, or perhaps, this understanding that there will be no attack on tourists. There'll be no attack on tourism places. But that is the rules of this engagement, this proxy war have completely changed with this brutal terror attack that has happened in Pahalgam. Nobody would have expected this. Last year, I was at the same location where this happened with my family members. And I actually motivated many others to visit the same place. I would urge people to go to Kashmir because that would be the strongest kind of response that we as a nation can give to bullies, to Pakistan-sponsored terrorism. I think, finally, I would say that militarily, we have achieved our target. Militarily, we wanted a limited kind of a answer to this kind of a terrorism that has come in. I think we've achieved our objectives. But when it comes to larger narrative, there's much more we need to do. And of course, when India plans to be a world power, India aims to be a world power, and India thinks that we can take an independent position that is in our national interest when it comes to Russia-Ukraine conflict or Israel-Hamas war, then we would have to be prepared that the Western countries or countries that matter will perhaps put out a very balanced statement and not something that would be in our favor entirely, even if it is terrorism, even if it is something that needs to be condemned at the global level. Finally, last point is the role of the United Nations. I think over the years, United Nations has completely failed, unfortunately, to counter terrorism, to bring the international community together when it comes to terrorism. You can't be only asking for a ceasefire all the time or just issuing condemnation or paper statements. You need to rise to the occasion. This is a UN that is mentally and physically 50 years behind. And there need to be reforms in the United Nations. If that does not happen, I think these are testing times for the UN. I mean, I don't think that a larger peace could be achieved when the UN looks the other way. Thank you very much.
Very much, Mr. Kaul, and you would agree with me that this was not only a passionate expose, but a brilliant summing up of developments. Thank you very much. I think, as was said, this attack was an attack both on Insaniyat and Kashmiriyat. That is the point. This is precisely what happened, and there are many other things. As regards the UN, when has it ever worked, actually? Patel in 1948-49 was said that it's the UN in Security Council, not the UN Security Council. So, I mean, this is a rather old story. But now we have the third speaker. I think he is joining us online. This is Dr. Tanwir Arshed from Presidency University, Kolkata. So I think he would be speaking now.
Hello.
Yes.
I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you're audible
Okay.
and you have your 10 minutes. Do stick to those,
Sure, sir.
please.
Just, I'm sorry. Good afternoon to the distinguished chair and all my respected panelists and audience on and off the dais. Before I begin, let me take this opportunity to express my gratitude and thankfulness to the council for organizing such an insightful discourse on decoding the narratives of Operation Sindoor. And I especially convey my regards to Dr. Bhattacharya, Dhruv Bhattacharya, for inviting me to share my thoughts on the same. Now, as the distinguished chairs has reminded me that I've been allotted with 10 minutes to put up my comments on the broader theme of today's discussion, I prepared myself mentally to limit my arguments and understanding of the post-Pahalgam terror attack in 10 major themes or sectors, if I may say. So see, as a student and a scholar of world politics, we believe that narrative building in international relations are very crucial in mapping and reading the discourse of foreign policy analysis. Now, usually these narratives, as Sir Hasnain has talked about, are built when we see that there is a threat to override the existing status quo or existing order. And these are primarily done by state or non-state actors. In fact, the Pahalgam terror attack and the aftermath can be considered as one such really significant geopolitical or geostrategic development, which in fact not only changed the ontological nature of the state-sponsored terrorism, but simultaneously gave a new epistemological thrust in analysis of any nation-state response towards the aggressor. However, if we analyze carefully, we see that Operation Sindoor and its aftermath can be analyzed and narrated in 3 different levels. I did it I divided my presentation in 3 different parts: the impact on the global, the sub-regional politics, and the domestic politics. And my presentations will basically try to encompass all these 3 levels of analysis. So firstly, at the sub-regional level, India's response after the terror attack showcased 4 substantial narratives. First, we were clear about setting new red lines of counter-terrorism policy, especially with regard to the long-standing and recurrent sub-conventional state-sponsored strategy of terror, which has been constantly adopted by Pakistan since 1947. Through this operation, India gave a bold and a definite stand against terrorism. In fact, I would say that the successive round of, the strikes, military mobilization on Pakistan's terror installment marked a new kind of India's counter-terrorism approach by treating and labeling any kind of terror attack as act of war. Now, it has set a new narrative that henceforth any terrorist provocation by our neighboring state is supposed to be met with a full-scale conventional response by India. The second aspect which I would like to focus on is India's effective and robust deterrence posture. India succeeded in striking the targeted terrorist strike from distance. Our layered air defense system effectively intercepted the waves of incoming drones and missiles. Our air power suppressed the adversary air attacks. And finally, our missile proficiency was evident in precisely hitting on Pakistan's terror outfit, which actually showcased a new and effective deterrence posture, which was very clear that simply we need to escalate to de-escalate these sort of developments. The third was we were clear and bold in bashing the stability instability paradox of Pakistan nuclear buff. From swift cross-border surgical strike, which was just now mentioned in 2016, to the airstrike which we had in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa region in 2019, and the recent Operation Sindoor. we have progressively expanded the scope of our operations, and this has exposed the emptiness of Pakistan's long narrative nuclear threat, which it has always tried to give up in a form of a catastrophic escalation. And it made it very clear for our troubled neighbor that terrorism in any form and any type will always be met with a calibrated military response without inviting a nuclear holocaust. The fourth aspect, which I feel that this Operation Sindoor has set, is reinforcing Pakistan's shadow and sacred games with terror outfits. I mean, there has been a lot of evidences in the past and in present, which was just mentioned by my previous speaker, where the evidence of funerals of terrorists attended by high-level Pakistani military, ISI, and police officials reiterated once again Pakistan's deep link to harbor and give a safe haven to terrorist outfit. In fact, post-Abbottabad, it was very clear that Pakistan still remained constantly in its policy of providing a safe haven for all form of fringe, fundamentalist, and terrorist outfit with a single agenda of destabilizing the regional status quo and peace process. Now, moving to the global level, if I try to analyze, we'll see that, first of all, accepting the proposal to keep Operation Sindoor in an abeyance, or I would like to reframe it as a strategic pause for the time being, especially at a point of time when we were at the zenith of an advantageous position in the war, yet again showcased India's long-term civilizational commitment for a peaceful and a rule-based world order. We didn't want it to give birth to another Ukraine or Syria or Palestine or Israel. Rather, the strategic pause in Operation Sindoor reflects India's mature strategic calculus, and which is deeply rooted in our civilizational philosophy of Buddha, of nonviolence of Gandhi, of Nehru and Tagore. We also, if also analyzed carefully, we'll see that India's response through Operation Sindoor, in fact, was very carefully crafted and calibrated. And henceforth, globally, we bring a new form of a precision-based warfare, which in fact added a new debate in the existing literature of limited warfare under any nuclear umbrella. We were ethical, we were responsive, we were very well designed, and we tried to avoid collateral damage to military, civilian, and government establishment as much as possible. A highly commendable yet a morally virtuous move of voicing our grievances, which I say is nothing but a sheer marker of a true Vishwaguru, which India is actually proceeding forward. The third aspect of India's global impact of decoding Operation Sindoor narrative is reflected in India's firm commitment to negate the two-nation theory. When as an academician, we analyze the configuration of the global delegation, which was sent for voicing out India's stand on terrorism, it not only projected India's mature diplomatic move, but was also interesting in a way that the convoy had 10 Indian Muslim leaders, which in fact reiterated our continuous non-commitment to a two-nation theory, which is the basis of Pakistan. In fact, if I try to analyze South Asia, one aspect of South Asia nation was born because of religion. Another nation on the extreme east is born out of civilization language. But we were groomed and birthed, and our establishment is based on our civilization, rich heritage, and that got further reiterated. Fourth aspect I would like to mention that what we did because of Operation Sindoor was also we bashed the Western gender biased masculine discourse of foreign policy. You know, the language, the sophistication, the humbleness, and yet the sheer commitment to uphold the nation's pride and interest, which was reflected by our spokesperson, especially Wing Commander Vyomika Singh and Colonel Sophia Qureshi. It not only bashed the Western narrative of hegemonic masculinity that dominates the understanding of foreign policy, but in fact brought forth a new understanding of a gender-neutral, unbiased foreign policy narrative, which is nothing but carrying forward the legacy of bloods of Rani Lakshmi Bai and others. Something which I would romanticize as what Tagore would say, that anything is right as long as Chitto Jeta Bhoy Shunno Uchcho Jeta Shir, when the hell is hell high and the mind is without fear. Lastly, in the domestic parlance, we witness that this Operation Sindoor has reiterated a new form of cooperative paradiplomacy. Now, or let's say a non-Western way or an Indian way of understanding how diplomacy works. For instance, the all-party delegation for global diplomacy, which was sent, was a hallmark of Indian democracy. We saw oppositional leaders coming in. We saw that irrespective of ideological or political commitments, people and our leaders coming forward, giving priority to our national interests, voicing out our grievances. It's something which has set a completely new narrative of understanding how diplomacy works in a present globalized world order. Although this is nothing new, I mean, because if we remember that Mr. Vajpayee was sent to Geneva by Prime Minister Narasimha Rao once long back when he was trying to talk about our stand. Okay, so you know, this is something which has brought an Indian way of looking things forward, or which I would say reminds us of what once our former Prime Minister Vajpayee reiterated, that it is our Indian parampara that sarkarein aayengi aur jayengi, satta aayengi aur jayegi, but desh zinda rehna chahiye, desh ka loktantra zinda rehna chahiye. So simply putting it forward, Operation Sindoor yet again brought forward boldly the narrative that for Indian, nation comes first. What would be the repercussion of it, and what would be the aftermath of this Operation Sindoor on the geopolitics of the region, and tracking how Pakistan is going to respond to it? It has been beautifully explained by my previous speakers, but I would like to just comment and end my arguments by saying this word that, you know, this is nothing new that Pakistan is doing in. Pahalgam was one of an incident which is expected from a troubled, failed state like Pakistan, a state whose GDP is sliding down, a state who is going down in the poverty level, a state who has no match, but only a single agenda of destabilizing the peace process, rule-based world order of the region or the global foray. Incidents like this is something which is bound to take place. What we need to do is we need to adopt a very cautious, very strategically stringent move, simply escalate our power to ensure that
may I request? I think we are running out of time.
That's it.
Thank you for
I'm
ending.
done.
Thank you for ending, and it was interesting to hear an academic point of view on this development. And now we will open up the discussion. I will take 3 questions, and then you can kindly identify yourself, make the questions brief, and if you want a particular panelist to answer it, please mention that. And so we are open for it. Sir.
Thank you. My name is Preet Malik Jafri. I'm a retired diplomat, so I suppose my questions would
You
be
have to keep it a little
slightly
closer.
lower. Okay. I said I'm a retired diplomat, so I suppose my questions would be slightly simple. First question to the entire panel. Nobody has touched among you on the factor of intelligence. If I have understood everything that you have pointed out, that is an extremely important element. And I have a feeling that there we have a weakness. So I would like to have a comment from whichever one of you feels that you can offer something in that direction. The second question is, nobody has touched upon the fact that in the process of our revealing our technological strength in the military side, what lessons would the Chinese have got? And what will they likely to make use of against us whenever the occasion arises? And in that context, would they continue to utilize the facility that Pakistan provides for their testing out whatever weaponry and equipment and technology they would like to put? No one has touched on that, and the impact of Operation Sindoor in that context. The third element, a third question, if I may, is in the context of the American president's consistent position. And this is not new. Even in his first term, he had offered mediation. We have a situation developing now where Pakistan is openly requesting for the American intervention. India has been resisting that. But taking in particular the context of the Indus Waters Treaty and it's being held in abeyance, will there not be further pressure on us if even in terms of the weather itself, there's a shortfall in water flows into Pakistan, with a request for the Americans to intervene? So these are my three questions.
Yes, please.
My name is Atul Aneja, former Strategic Affairs Editor of the Hindu.
I didn't catch your name.
My name is Atul Aneja,
Okay.
former Strategic Affairs Editor of the Hindu. Yep.
Yes.
So
I've read you.
Thank you. I have a quick question for General Hasnain. You mentioned that we have been able to impose dissuasion rather than deterrence following Ops Sindoor. Just following up on that thought, that if we have imposed dissuasion, if I were a Pakistani, what would I look at? Would you think that the theater may be shifting here from Kashmir to Bangladesh, given the fact that there is, I would say, anti-India government over there, and perhaps opening also entry for China and Pakistan together, looking more at Siliguri corridor and the Northeast as a response to what we have done in Ops Sindoor? And just quickly, a second one on the outreach by Pakistan to the United States this time. Do you think Pakistan will be able to balance its relations between the US and China? Because of the earlier question as well, you mentioned about the Americans coming in after Afghanistan. This is the first time they are back in the region after 2021. That's all. Thank you.
Yes, the gentleman there in red. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Samir. Since we are talking about narrative needs consumer. And for that, we gave proofs. We sent a parliamentary delegation for more than 30 countries. So what is going to be the posture of international community when it comes to Pakistan? Is it going to be silence, critical, or call them friends and partners in counterterrorism and give them tranche, as it happened recently in USM? Thank you.
Thank you. No, we'll we've taken these three questions. It's good seeing you, Preet, here, and great to see you looking good. Your questions, they are direct and straight as they should be, and I'll attempt to answer them. Look, this was something which I had planned to say that in fact, what Sindoor has brought out is a near perfect sync of all of government action that was taken. And it goes without saying that the targeting, the pinpoint targeting that was done would not have been possible without intelligence. And taking on from what my friend Atta had said, is that in fact, if I look back, why was there that delay of 15 days? It is because you have to keep up. We had the targets. These targets were available. We all knew these, but it is really to update it as to what is the latest situation. And that intelligence can only get, and it takes a certain amount of time to be absolutely sure that, yes, this is it. It's not just the place, it's who is there and what exactly has to be hit when. So intelligence played a critical part, and it's not only in the targeting and many other aspects. Intelligence, without that, you're gone. You have to have good intelligence. The intelligence was excellent. In terms of revealing strengths, on this one, any conflict is a learning area. You will always upgrade. You reveal certain things because you have to use your weapons. You have to use your systems. The other side learns, you will learn also. We have also learned in the process. And as someone was saying on another discussion the other day about China using Pakistan, we used to talk about it as a two-front war. It's not a two-front war. It's an extended front. Pakistan is being used by China and increasingly will be used by China. And it is really one entity. That's how I look at it, at any case, that they are going to work hand in glove. In fact, the other day, I learned that there is a permanent presence of senior Pakistani official in PLA and vice versa. So they are working hand in glove. No question about it. It's an extended front. About Trump, the less said, the better. I don't know. Seriously, you can take the man. Yes, he has offered and stated mediation, but I think the proof of the pudding is in the eating of it. We are not and never have been interested, even when India wasn't what it is today, in any type of mediation. And Mr. Kaul mentioned this. He was privy to certain briefings, which I wasn't privy to. So the question of our asking or wanting mediation is out of the window. It doesn't arise. For me as an outsider, and I'm a total outsider, I'm not as active as Preet is, though he's a little bit older. But the point is, who telephoned whom for a ceasefire? It was the Pakistani DGMO. We didn't ring up. They were the ones who were asking for a ceasefire. And we were not, we said, look, you guys, if you want to have it, you will ring up. The final point, and this is something which is very close to me because I've been working on it for more than 2-3 decades, is the Indus Waters Treaty. And what could be the consequences? The fact is that the Indus Waters Treaty was a badly negotiated treaty by us. It is a treaty that is highly unfair to us. We get only 20% of the waters in terms of the eastern rivers. The actual fair share of India is in excess of 40%. So the treaty is bad. Now, the fact is that more than 2 years ago, we had been notifying Pakistan for a renegotiation of the treaty on a number of issues. They did not even want to talk to us about it. Today, when we have said treaty in abeyance, now they are crying. But I hope we don't give in easily on this one. And I don't think we will, because it is very clear from what the government has said that until there is a clear indication that Pakistan will not involve itself in export of terror to India, they have couched it in much more elegant language than what I am using. But in effect, it is that in case that doesn't happen, this treaty will be kept in abeyance and we shall be free to do what we want. Now, you may say they will go to court and they are making all sorts of noises, International Court of Justice. Let me tell you very clearly that under international law practice, it is very clear that in case situations arise which are contrary to what existed at the time when the treaty was negotiated, we were supposed to work in goodwill and in a cooperative spirit, much less than go to war. If you're in a situation like near war, like what we are at, we have every right not to accede to the treaty. It is a legal position which is there. So we are actually on a very strong wicket in everywhere. And in any case, which upper riparian even listens to the lower riparian? I discussed it with the Turks when I was there in 2 decades ago. And I explained to them not only the IWT, but also Faraka, incidentally. And they said, virtually, are you mad to have done what you did? In terms of how much we have in magnanimity that India has shown in the matter, it is unthinkable. And I think this treaty certainly needs a renegotiation. If you wish to add or subtract, and then the other two questions, I think.
I'll first of all address your questions, sir. Firstly, to be fair, sir, 10 minutes. You would not expect that everything which you perceive right or important is going to be covered by the speaker. It'll be mostly as per perception of the speaker. So I will bring out a lot of important aspects which you have just covered. Intelligence. Strategic intelligence already covered by Ambassador Satish Chandra to a great extent. It's the tactical intelligence that we got to talk about. Are you aware? Let me just give it to you anecdotally. 25 years ago, I was a Colonel General Staff of the Victor Force in South Kashmir. In the morning at 5:30, I used to get a potha that's big of intercepts every morning, riffle through it to see what could possibly happen in our area. And I can tell you, I could almost determine where the terrorists are going to strike on what day at what time. Today, none of that is possible because technologies have changed. All communications are being spoofed. WhatsApp, you can't break WhatsApp. I hope you're getting those messages these days on WhatsApp that everything you're speaking is private. We're not being able to break it. So communication today, communication intelligence, SIGINT, signal intelligence, is almost zero. Pahalgam, no one had any idea of anything like this happening around. That is one of the major disadvantages with which the security forces in Kashmir are working today, and I would say all over the country today. Human intelligence, because the strength of terrorists has come down to, as what Aditya was saying, 80 to 130, we stopped investing in human intelligence in a bigger way. It always happens when conflict starts drawing down. And therefore, today we are now having that problem of not having enough human resources, not having enough human intelligence. And therefore, I think this is an issue which needs to be revisited completely. Second thing, the Chinese lessons. We didn't cross the international border. We didn't cross the LC. So it's nothing on ground warfare. What the Chinese definitely would be looking at is that the chances of something happening on the line of actual control is a limited war. I don't expect a general war against China anytime in the future. In limited war. He has probably looked at all the aspects of this 4-day, 88-hour standoff and said, these are the kind of situations which can happen on the LAC. Not there, therefore, all that which he has picked up would be from the Air Force, primarily air operations, the nature of air operations, he would have observed. Now, here also you found the Air Force didn't go all out. In 88 hours, we flew a couple of sorties here and there and remained grounded for some time and then flew again. I'm not sure that the Chinese could have picked up too much technical intelligence from what has happened here. Of course, the Pakistanis were very, very, hyper on trying to pick up things. I'm waiting for a gentleman called Air Commodore Kaisar Tufail from the Pakistan Air Force, who wrote a brilliant analysis of Kargil, if you remember, and also wrote a brilliant analysis on Balakot and the standoff after Balakot, which happened with, the MiG-21 Bison. He will come out with something definitely technical in the near future. Next couple of days, you'll find a brilliant essay coming out each time he does that. So that is something which the Chinese would obviously be looking at. My second last point, the issue of dissuasion, sir. I would say the policy of 1,000 cuts has to continue. As far as I'm looking at myself, putting myself into the shoes of a Pakistani planner and saying, what can I do which he is trying to dissuade me from doing? I must somehow continue this whole doctrine of 1,000 cuts, which means let me extend it into other parts of India. Let me do it in Jammu. Jammu and Kashmir is a challenge today. Kashmir particularly is a challenge. Jammu region, Kathua region is still relatively easier to do it. Punjab, extend it into Punjab. And very correctly brought out your second part of the question on this issue of Bangladesh. Extending it that side, because you can make out that what had dried up in the Northeast was support for the terrorist groups. Now, if you're suddenly bleeding here in Punjab or in Kashmir, and suddenly you start bleeding in Nagaland, Manipur, and Meghalaya, that is be a major challenge for you. As far as the Siliguri corridor is concerned, I don't think that's a major threat. It comes up as a major threat in a all-out war. In limited wars, I don't think this Lal Munir Haat and all these things, this is all gray zone warfare. Putting it into your mind, doubts into your mind, it really doesn't have many great major significance. My last question. This question which you asked about the international community's narrative on Pakistan, will it change? What Pakistan is really good at and is better than us is at strategic communication. Take it from me. Someone who has studied strategic communication for many years, right? I'll give you anecdotally, went to Israel for the Herzliya Summit, Counter-Terrorism Summit, was to speak on Jammu and Kashmir. First time ever India was speaking at the Herzliya Summit on Kashmir. I said, here is a place I can speak openly. No one from Pakistan will be here because they don't even have diplomatic relations between Pakistan and Israel. At the breakfast table on the morning when I had to speak, 3 Pakistanis joined me for breakfast. They are everywhere, from Sydney to Singapore to Manama to Brussels to Atlanta to San Francisco. They are everywhere. And we have been crying hoarse. Sorry, sir, the Indian Foreign Service is here. We have been crying hoarse on this to say, let us ensure that all think tanks of the world, the important things out of the world, are all sensitized to the Indian narrative. Let us go and speak there regularly on a regular basis. It's not happened. It's not happened all this while. And it needs to happen. We need a strategic communication body in India like the ISPR, the Inter-Services Public Relations, which was raised in 1949, for your information. We haven't raised such a body till today. So.
Just briefly come in on 2 points. One is on the intelligence question. Often what happens in Jammu and Kashmir is that you have a general intelligence, but you do not have a specific intelligence. And over last 2 years, if you see, most of these terror attacks have been happening near forest areas. So what they do is they do recce, particularly in Jammu area, Jammu division. And finally, after conducting the terror attack, they exfiltrate back to Pakistan. This happened over the last 2 to 3 years very often. What has also happened is that you mentioned technology. There is an app called Alpine Quest app, which the Pakistanis are using, made by China. And this is an offline app, works like Google Maps. You enter anything in advance. And the same was being used by the Pahalgam attackers. and a lot of terrorists that have conducted terror attacks in Jammu. Apart from that, they're using something called the ultra sets. Now, these ultra sets are not exactly sat phones, not satellite phones, but similar to that. You can connect an ultra set to a mobile phone and send a text and audio and communicate, and you cannot detect an ultra set pinpointed location. What we found out, what I know so far, is that during the Pahalgam attack, also ultra sets were being used. And for a while, there was a pinpointed location of 10 to 15 kilometers in the entire forest. And that's why we saw over 48 to 72 hours, there were massive combing operations that were underway in those forests. But they either managed to exfiltrate, but my guess would be that the local OGWs would have been helping them to hide somewhere in Kashmir. Secondly, on the narrative aspect, what has happened is that I divide this narrative into domestic narrative and international narrative. While domestic, we are always out there and there's much success. But when there's international narrative, there are problems that we face because there's been a sustained campaign against India, particularly in some parts of the Western press and some parts of the press in the Middle East as well. For instance, the Al Jazeera, for instance, the Washington Post, etc., who have come with articles, particularly on Jammu and Kashmir, without any factual basis really coming in. But I think there's been a drastic change as well that we have. I completely agree with General Hasnain that we need a kind of a command center on strategic communications out there. We need to be learning from our adversaries. Not just that, I will go a step further. We need a Pakistan Studies Center within the Ministry of External Affairs. We have a PI desk, but we do not have, just like we have the Chinese studies center, we do not have a Pakistan Studies Center. And we also need an intra-communication within the government of India. MHA, MOD, MIB, and MEA, other ministries. At such very sensitive times, critical times, the communication is of essence. What I noted, and I've spoken ad nauseum about this, is during the Pulwama terror attack, and later we did Balakot, and our pilot was taken by Pakistan. During those period of 12 to 24 hours, there was complete silence by North Bloc and South Bloc during that time. This time we did course correction to a greater extent. But I think when your adversary is on a communication mode 24/7, when your adversary has its complete media in his fist, and he controls what will go out in the Pakistani media, he controls what will happen, what will not happen. Journalists are kidnapped, journalists are abducted, journalists are forced to flee from Pakistan. You have to be prepared. And, I would look inwards. I represent the media out here. Some of the reporting, unfortunately, that happened during that particular time was unfortunate and sad. So I'm not saying that the government should really go out with a stick to the Indian media and say that you need to report responsibly. But I think this needs to come within ourselves, particularly for the TV channels, that you cannot report in such a fashion where your sovereignty, your national interest, your national security is compromised.
The lady, yes, there.
Thank you, panelists. I'm Nandini Khandelwal, research intern at ICWA. I have two questions. The first is that in the aftermath of the post-operation Sindoor, we could see hyphenation or rehyphenation of India and Pakistan. If we see Trump's US President Trump's statement as well. So this also points towards Pakistan not being held accountable for its actions. So is that a setback for India's foreign policy? And what should be the plan of action to secure India's image or narrative as to how world perceives it? My second question is related to the abeyance of Indus Water Treaty. There are some debates ongoing about the apprehensiveness about India's dam capacity, like for how long will we be able to hold on to the waters? Is it enough? So can you touch upon that and tell us about the ground reality? Thank you.
Next one, anyone else? Yes, the lady there. I'm partial to ladies.
Hello, yeah, good afternoon.
Treated myself as the same weakness. Ah.
Good afternoon, sir. This is Sakshi, and because my question is around journalism, so I would like Mr.
Question is about?
regarding journalism and the background of the operations in news. So if
Hmm.
all right, so it's open then. How does a modern military operations like that of Operation Sindoor navigate the thin line between operational secrecy and democratic transparency in media and narrative building?
Okay. Anyone else? The gentleman there, yeah.
Good afternoon, sir. I am Trivedi Jal, a research analyst at TICE. So, sir, my question is to you that given that Pakistan has close coordination with China, and as we have seen during the Operation Sindoor as well, and our recent engagement with Beijing, particularly since the Kazan summit that happened in Russia in 2024, so, sir, what do you think about the future of Indo-China ties, given that China has continued to support Rawalpindi?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
So, sir, what do you think about the future of the Indo-China ties, given China's continued support to Rawalpindi?
Okay. So we'll take that and we'll close it. Let's start with the journalist question and that you go with first.
I'll just briefly touch upon the first two questions about, you know, a false equivalence that is put in between India and Pakistan. I think that continued from Clinton to Obama to even Trump to a certain extent. But I'll just read for you a tweet that Donald Trump did on January 1st, 2018 at 5:42 p.m. He says, the United States has foolishly given Pakistan more than $33 billion in aid over the last 15 years. And they have given us nothing but lies and deceit, thinking of our leaders as fools. They give safe haven to the terrorists. We hunt in Afghanistan with little help, no more. Now, this is what happened in 2018, and we know what happened later. We also know what happened when Taliban tried to take over Afghanistan and there was this Doha talks that were underway, and how US faced a miserable embarrassment on the Hamid Karzai airport when you saw those US aircrafts actually flying in and people flung all across. So the reality of the matter is that there is an hot and cold approach that Trump has. I think Trump uses his, these kind of statements that he makes as leverage in many ways. I think our diplomatic heft would come under test with such statements and with changing of the statements that are coming in from Trump and Washington, D.C. But I think whatever we saw, Trump going across and saying that trade was used, etc., was not the reality. Trade was never discussed when Rubio and J.D. Vance actually spoke. Trade never actually came under talks. And yesterday also, when Trump spoke, he said that I was the one who got the peace done and ceasefire done, and I haven't seen even a single story out there. But the reality of the matter is that trade was never discussed. Yes, maybe they spoke to the Pakistan Army chief and told him that if you agree to a ceasefire, then probably you will get the IMF loan and probably you will get the World Bank loan, and we'll be easy on you in that regard. Who knows? Perhaps we'll know in future. Secondly, on the aspect of our reportage when it comes to military conflicts and secrecy to be maintained, I think firstly, I would urge our Indian media to conduct conflict training exercises, because what happens at the level of the Associated Press or Reuters or BBC, etc., is not very much visible when it comes to conflict reportage out here. I haven't seen any major media house in India giving, firstly, conflict training, both in terms of reportage, in terms of secrecy, etc., to the journalists or war reporters, war correspondents. And secondly, I think from the government side, I think the most important thing is engagement. You have to keep journalists engaged always. When there is a military conflict ongoing, of course, whoever owns the story will actually rule the story, will rule the social media, will rule the media all across. And this is what happened during Balakot as well. Our strikes were a paradigm shift, really. We had never seen something like that for years. But we had a gentleman called Asif Ghafoor on the other side, who was going on a press conference, and his press conference was being televised live all across, while we were standing at the North Block waiting for some kind of a development or some information. So I think basic training, conflict reportage, engagement from the government side, as General Hasnain said very importantly, strategic communications is of essence. In many ways, when such military conflicts happen, you have to preempt that this will happen and you have to be ready for that. I think our DGMOs, our officers like Qureshi, Colonel Qureshi, was a brilliant exercise that a woman face, bravely putting across details of Operation Sindoor. And on the other hand, DGMOs, before they speak, putting out a 1-minute clip of what has happened, the reality of terrorism, which is age old and the international community must realize. So I think we have learned a little, and I can tell you that on 11 years of Modi government, I was on a lunch with the senior minister. I won't name him, but he agreed. The first statement that he made to me just 2 days back was that on narrative, we need to do much more. I think there needs to be a course correction. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'll address this issue in 30 seconds. The issue of media, that's essentially Aditya's domain. But I'll say, if anything, to understand between secrecy or otherwise, the media is equally nationalist, patriotic and nationalist. And the media must be made to realize what is national interest. The best way of making the media realize what is national interest is to ensure that you have closer interaction between the media and the armed forces in particular, because they are the ones who have to work together during conflicts. I find we introduced war correspondent courses, if you remember, information warfare courses, but I don't think these are taken seriously enough. We need to invest much more in this. The manner in which Gulf War I started with embedded journalism in 1990, that's the kind of way you got to take this by the throat in a transformational kind of way. It can't work transactionally at all. Having said that, the issue of hyphenation, I'm not going to look at hyphenation side of it, but I will definitely say one thing from my experience. I've done a couple of courses in the United States of America also. This I can say that if I was standing with a Pakistani officer here, or 2 Indian officers and 2 Pakistani officers were standing here, and a US Army general walked in, you can bet anything he will first shake hands with the Pakistani. He won't come to me. No, he won't come to me. Sento. You got to remember the age-old relationship of the 50s, the military-to-military relationship, when the Americans were deep in trouble in Vietnam, in Korea, etc. It was Pakistan which was joining in. Now, let's look at other investments. Are you aware, last year when Ukraine ran out of ammunition, there was not a bomb left in Ukraine. Where did the ammunition come from? It came from Pakistan. $600 million worth of ammunition was airlifted in C-17s by the American armed forces straight to Ukraine. That's why this kind of a relationship exists. And there's no question of a hyphenation or anything in that case. This relationship has been age-old. And each time you perceive that it's breaking down, it seems even better. Why? Yesterday morning's news, Asim Munir going to the United States. Visit, he's a part of that for celebrations of the US Army or whatever it is. So we have to invest much more in these things. We have not done perhaps enough of it. Was there any other question for me? That's thank you.
Questions to me, which I'll answer, one on IWT and one China-Pakistan close coordination. And then after that, I'll make my closing comments. So first, on the Indus Waters Treaty about dam capacity. Actually, it is correct that in the short term, one will not be able to do too much in terms of affecting water supply to Pakistan. But what will the implications of what we have said is, if the treaty is to be in abeyance, we are no longer bound by the development of future projects on those rivers, and we will be able to enhance our capacity of utilization. And incidentally, our capacity is underutilized even under the treaty. As of now, we are not required to give any water from the eastern rivers, but actually water is flowing even from the eastern rivers, which we are not required to give to Pakistan. Similarly, on the western rivers, we are permitted some projects, some capacity, which we have not done so far. Thirdly, on those rivers, the projects that are being done have been, and people don't know this well enough, but it is a fact that many projects which would actually be of direct benefit to Kashmir, like the Tulbul navigation project and so on, those have been stymied by Pakistan. They can be resumed pretty fast. And even your own existing structures like Salal, etc., which is on the Chenab, they, because of the restrictions imposed, the life of those projects has decreased. We are not allowed to open the sluice gates, etc., or do the flushing operations. Now, those can be done. In fact, we have started doing them already after keeping the treaty in abeyance. These were not permitted to us. Now, these sort of things can happen. So actually, it's not just a question of posing a problem to Pakistan. It is actually improving the situation in India, particularly in Jammu and Kashmir, because that is the area which is directly affected. So that's on that aspect. On the question of collusion between China and Pakistan, look, this is an old story. It hasn't started today. It's been building up over the decades. In fact, the nuclear capability, etc., is a Chinese product. The missiles are Chinese. So this game has been going on. Now on the military side, it's all over the place. First they were Americans, now they are Chinese. And we will have to manage this. We should be aware, we are aware of it, but we will have to manage our relations. It is difficult for India, but we will need to keep it in mind and do this. Now, just very quickly, we are running out of time. I'll be brief in my closing comments. I particularly want to address two issues. I won't go over various things which have been repeated, but which were raised in the course of the discussions. One is, why did Pakistan do Pahalgam? And what was the rationale for that? And we spoke about attack on Insaniyat, Kashmiriyat. Absolutely correct. The other point, which is very important, is we must keep in mind the timing. Pakistan is in deep trouble and was in deep trouble when this happened. Asif Munir was not a very popular general. And in fact, his name was Mud in Pakistan. It is really to revive him. That's why this is perhaps the first instance in history where a general has been made a field marshal after having lost in a conflict. This is what has happened to revive his future. And as Mr. Kaul pointed out, the other thing which is very bad in Pakistan is that many parts of it are in virtual report. Balochistan, we have all seen, you heard about Jafar Express. It's not just that. Incidents are happening even as I speak today. Every day there is an incident in Balochistan, and the army is in deep trouble. Pakistan is in deep trouble. Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, it's the same story. At a lower level, but the movement is intense. The Pathans and the Punjabis have never got on historically, and this has got exacerbated. Sindh is deeply upset now because the Pakistan army is doing a project which would mean diversion of the water, the Cholistan project. So it is in very deep trouble. When you are in this country is in deep trouble, it turns around and attacks India in one way or another. And here I would like to say that what I started off with when I was talking is that people in India don't understand Pakistan well enough. There are two exceptions on both my sides. I think they know Pakistan and the reality of it very well. But to put it very, very clearly, and here I disagree a little bit in nuance in terms of ideology. Yes, Mr. Kaul is right that Pakistan has, over the years, from Zia's time onwards, been radicalized. This is a process which is continuing. It is now at a much higher level than ever before. But it isn't ideology per se. From 1947 onwards, it has been Pakistan's leitmotif, if I may say so, to undermine India. India is the enemy. There's a wonderful book written by B.K. Nehru, in which he relates an incident, and dates back to 1948. When he was in Pakistan, he was a member of the Indian Civil Service. The cabinet secretary was also Indian Civil Service. They were all buddies, very good friends. And he had gone for negotiations on pre-partition debt and things like that. The discussions were successful. But every morning in Dawn, which was then a much more radical paper than it is today, in Dawn, every day there was an article bashing India. And he spoke to the cabinet secretary over good old Scotch whiskey, saying that, I am deeply upset. Every day there is this article bashing India. And this continues. Cabinet secretary said, have another drink. Don't be upset. We need an enemy. That's why India bashing, no better enemy than India to keep our country unified. So B.K. Nehru said, how long do you need to have this enemy? He said, the next few years. The book was written in 1998, and B.K. Nehru said, this still holds good. Now, if you look deeply, and I'm doing a book on this, where I have mentioned this, if you list out from 1947 till today, the extent of magnanimity shown to Pakistan, not only on Indus Waters Treaty, but on 10 other things, of how much we have bent over backwards to try and help Pakistan and to develop a better relationship, we failed totally. Every time they have come back and sought to undermine you. So my take on Pakistan is that in their DNA, it is written in their DNA, it's not even ideology. Ideology has been used. But in fact, they will undermine you in every way possible. And that is why I say that you will get terrorism against you from time to time from Pakistan, because that is the way they will react. My solutions to it are there, which I will not talk about here, but we can have a discussion on that. The last point I wanted to make is something which we have talked about always, and I have experienced it, so I'll share it with you, because a part of my career, I was dealing with Pakistan on human rights in the terrible times of Geneva in the 90s on human rights and strategic communication. Pakistan will always, I agree with everything both my colleagues here have said, my friends have said, that we need to do better. We need to look at it in an institutionalized manner. All that they have said, I agree with. But Pakistan will always be ahead of you. And I'll tell you why. Because when Indian diplomats or India media or anyone talks, we like to talk with facts, with rationality. Pakistan is not constrained by facts and rationality. If you want facts, you will need a little time to know what is the damage exactly you have done. The first day you've done the damage, you won't know. You'll have the photographs, you need to analyze them. It'll take 3 days before you analyze it to see what is the damage. Here, before While they have engaged you, they've said we've shot down XYZ number of aircraft. How do they know? They were not shot down on their territory. Whatever was shot down, if it was shot down. So they will tell lies, lies, lies. And there is no constraint on them. On us, rightly, there is a constraint. There should be a constraint. Whatever we speak should be upfront and correct. And that is why that takes time. So you will not be first off the mark. They are first off the mark. And the reason they are first off the mark is because they are going to tell lies. So that is a problem you face. Indian media. I agree with Atta on this point also. Again, my Geneva experience. I had two excellent journalists who were good friends of mine, Indians. With papers, I'll name the papers, which I still read because I think they are good papers. The Indian Express and Hindu. And on the human rights issue, they wrote pieces echoing the Pakistani line. So I spoke to both of them separately. And I said that, you know, the national interest, these are not facts. What you have written is actually not correct. So please don't write it because it helps the Pakistanis. They said, no, you know, we feel this way and journalism is above national interest. This is the line that I got. And that's why I have a problem sometimes with the media. But I think what both of them have said is correct. We need to improve our performance. We need to try and educate people who are involved in media so that we act in a manner which is much more responsible than what it has sometimes been, and which is in the national interest and promotes India's cause. After all, that is the ultimate objective. So with those few words, I'd like to finish and to thank the organizers and my colleagues who made this discussion, I think, very useful. Thank you very much.
On behalf of ICWA, I would like to express my gratitude to the distinguished chairs, panelists, physically present and as well as online. My special thanks to all our members of the audience. To know more about ICWA's research work, events, outreach programs, and publications, do visit our site and social media handles on Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. Thank you again, and please join us for high tea in the foyer. Thank you again.